Many of us would like 2015 to be different. What if this year we got stronger? Stronger dads, moms, workers, students, grandparents, men, women, stronger in our relationships, our marriages, our finances, stronger in love, generosity, serving, in friendships, in community, in faith. Sounds like an amazing year. Let's sink our roots in deep so we can become stronger.
I want to welcome those who are joining us online. Glad that you could be with us, and glad those of you who are here in the seats this morning. Let's start with a question this morning, all right? We have been talking over the last 3 weeks about a word that God has given to our congregation in particular about 2015. Can you say that word? Those of you who've been here the last year, can you say that word loudly and with conviction? What's the word? Oh, man. You guys are better than first service. Yeah, all right. All right, stronger. That's true. You know, this area that we're going to be talking about this morning is really, I think, the key area that all of us have to grow stronger in. And the reason I say that is because we're going to be talking about what I believe to be is the supreme value for anyone who's a Christ follower. In fact, Jesus, a couple of different times in his ministry, was asked if you were to boil down what it means to be a follower of God, means to be a Christ follower, he tells the same thing every time to every person that asks him. And basically he says this, he says, love God with everything you've got. I mean, just love him with everything, your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. So it's love God, love people. Love God, love people. Love God, love people. And he says that is the supreme task for any person who's a Christ follower. The Apostle Paul, who didn't actually use the word stronger, but he talks about how you and I, and he urges you and I to grow stronger in our love, in our ability to love. And he starts off this marvelous treatise that he gives in 1 Corinthians 13 by saying this, I want to show you still a more excellent way. And then he describes in brilliant terms, probably the best description of love that's ever been written in all of human literature. And through it, he talks about love and what it is. And he says love is patient, love is kind. You know, you've heard these things. And he talks about love in terms of being thoughtful, love in terms of sacrifice, love in terms of long-lasting, love in terms of forgiveness. And all of those things have nothing to do with feelings, but has everything to do with behavior. And so he says, this is the way love behaves. This is how you can grow stronger. At the end of that, he sums this whole thing up and says, these three things remain, faith, hope, and what? Love. But the greatest of all these things, he says, is what? Love. And so it is the supreme virtue of all. And so this is the area that we're going to talk about growing stronger this weekend. Tomorrow is Martin Luther King holiday. And this last Friday, my wife and I went to see the movie Selma. It is a movie that needs to be seen. At times, it's a painful movie, but it needs to be seen. But as I watched that movie, I was reminded how many different times Dr. King would sprinkle a particular phrase through many of his speeches, many of his sermons, and it just resonated with me once again. He said this. He said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness." And hate cannot drive out hate. You hating somebody else cannot drive the hate out of their life. He said the only thing that can drive out hate is love. You know, only love can drive out hate. and it's all about love. Nelson Mandela also shared kind of these same sentiments, and he was fond of saying, no one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin. No one is born hating another person because of his background or his religion. People must be taught to hate. Someone has to teach them those things. And he says if people can be taught how to hate, they can also be taught how to love. And I think this is a very timely subject for you and I as followers of Jesus Christ. Like no other time that I can remember in my lifetime, Christians are being accused more often of not being very loving people, of being, quite frankly, hateful people. And that we need to, as Christ followers, need to grow and become stronger in our behavior that is loving. I talked with a guy a while back, and this guy, he enjoys telling other people that he is an agnostic. And in that, he has told me several times, it's not that I don't believe in God, I just think that people who do are either at the best misguided, at the most insanely stupid. That's wonderful talking to a preacher, you know. And so, but we have some conversations from time to time. And he began talking with me, and he said this. He says, I just don't see Christians as being very loving at all. He said, I see their attitudes as of hatred. And he said, a lot of Christians that I know are just closet racists. And he went on to say, he said, you know, my neighbor gets up every Sunday morning. I see him walk out to the car. He's got nice clothes on, gets in his car, and he drives off to church. And he's not any more loving than I am. Well, at first I went, whew, because I thought, he gets up and wears nice clothes. He can't be a member of Boulevard Christian Church, okay? So, you know, so I thought we're safe there, okay? And I don't know, sarcasm gets the best of me sometimes. And so he went on to say, he said, you know, I just don't think he's not any more loving than I am. And so I thought about that for a second. I said, can I walk through something with you? And so what could he say? But yeah, go ahead. And so I got a napkin, and I drew a line on the napkin. Let me walk through this with you. And I asked him some questions. I said, can I ask you a few questions? He said, sure. I said, what kind of family did you grow up in? I mean, what was your family like? And he said, well, quite frankly, he said, we had a very loving family. He said, I have a brother and two sisters. And he said, my parents instilled within us that we mattered to them. They cared for us. They tried to develop characteristics within our life that they knew we were strong in. They encouraged us in those sorts of things. And so I said, so you would say that your family was a pretty loving family? And he said, oh yeah, definitely. I said, what about your extended family? What's your extended family like? And he said, you know, I've got aunts and uncles that I know, even though I was not their child, if something happened to my mom and dad, that they would have been right there for me. They would have taken us in. And he said they had, one of his aunts in particular had adopted some kids of different races that included them all and stuff. He said, we used to have the greatest time at birthday parties when I was growing up with the people in my family. And I said, so you would say that in your extended family then, that love was a pretty high priority for you? And he said, yeah, I would. I said, well, tell me about the mentors that you had in your life, you know, school teachers or things like that. And he talked about one particular teacher that really sought him out and saw that he had some particular qualities in his life and helped him develop those qualities. He said, the reason that I do what I do today and my job that I have today is because of that particular teacher. And she really spent time with me. She made me sense that I had a gift in this area and wanted me to develop. And because of her investment in that, this is what I do today. And I said, okay, tell me about the workplace that you're in. He said, well, he said, my present company that I'm in right now, he said, I really enjoy. It's a pretty diverse group. We work on team type situations. He said, there's lots of different people, different kinds of people within my work situation. I enjoy it immensely. I get a lot out of it. I said, okay, so I said, from what you've said, you started with a pretty good base in your life towards being a loving person, didn't you? And he said, definitely. You know, my parents, my brothers and sisters, they all instilled that value within our lives. I said, okay, so you said to me that you didn't think that your neighbor, who was a Christian, was any more of a loving person that you were. That having God in their life meant no difference whatsoever at all. That they were no more loving than you. And he said, yeah, I don't think so. And I said, well, what do you know about your neighbor? And he said, well, I really don't know anything at all. And I said, well, let's just make some suppositions here. Let's say your neighbor's family, the family of origin that he grew up in, his dad beat him on a regular occasion. He just did not use discipline right. He put him down almost every chance that he got. He did not measure up to him in any way, and that was the atmosphere that was formed within that family constellation. There was not any type of nurture that was there at all. And I said, just suppose that was true. Then wouldn't he have started off on a negative basis? He went below the line? He said, well, yeah, I suppose so. And I said, what about his extended family? Let's just say that he grew up in an extended family, that he had a bunch of crazy aunts and uncles, all right? Any of you involved in a family that has crazy aunts and uncles? How many of you are those crazy aunts and uncles? Yeah, okay, all right. I've got a bunch of them in my family, okay? We all have the crazies within our family. But let's just say that within this guy's particular family constellation, his uncles were bigots. I mean, they were always having racist jokes. They're always putting down somebody else. There were certain categories of people that were dumb and stupid, and they could never get anything right. And he worked with them in jobs, and they just always fouled things up, and it was always a particular category of people. And let's just say he never was around any type of mentors that taught him any differently. There were people in certain categories that were less than he was, that was inferior to him, that he was superior to these particular categories of people. You may not be rich, you may not be famous, but at least you're better than these people, all right? That was the kind of attitudes they had. And let's just say in his workplace today, it is dysfunctional, you know? People are always upset. They're always trying to step on somebody else to get to the top. They're always putting other people down. And let's just say that's the workplace that he's in. I said, so you said to me that he is not any more loving than you are. But from where he came from to get to where you are was a lot longer journey. And I think sometimes we forget when we are looking at people and we say, they're not a very loving person. They have issues within their life. They're not very strong in love at all. That we forget sometimes that a lot of people begin in the deficit, not in a positive deal. They don't have as much to build on. And so when Jesus Christ comes into their life, the process to transformation to being a more loving person has a longer journey to go on than some people who don't have that background, that foundation within their life at all. Now, I don't know what kind of home life you came from, you know? But let me just say this, okay? I would say to you, as I said to my agnostic friend, where are you in your journey towards becoming more loving? And since this is Martin Luther King weekend, let's talk a little bit about racism, all right? Our sketch has already made people on the edge. I just want to push you a little further to the edge this morning, if I can, all right? First service, when I was doing this, the whiteboard was scooted further back, and people kept saying, go about 3 more feet, and I realized what they wanted me to do is to go off the front of the stage. So what I'd like to do this morning is kind of push you to the edge a little bit this morning, if you will. Let's talk about that. There are some of you who are here this morning who you grew up in homes, just like my friend, whose families gave you a great foundation. They treated other people well. There was an attempt at least to be able to see that there is value in all different people, that people matter to God in some way or another. And you may even have a work environment that is a very healthy work environment. Your extended family, you had mentors who put the idea of diversity being a positive thing within your life. And I also know that many of you grew up in homes where your parents taught you to hate. And what if you grew up in a home where the extended family was constantly putting down other people because of their race, because of their color or lack of color, and they put down other people as being inferior? What if you're around teachers and coaches who do that? That situation exists. But what if you start off in that level and you're below the line? You're in a deficit situation. What if that's where you are within your life? But then you come to faith in Christ and you learn about how God is not partial, that we're supposed to be radically inclusive people with our love. What if you came up to that little bit higher level? Who's done a longer race journey? You as a person who started off in deficit, or you who have been at the top of the baseline to begin with? Now, my concern is this, that as we go through what we're going to talk about today, my concern is this. It is dangerous to make judgments about who is more loving than the next person, because you have no way of knowing where that person has started. You don't know what the starting point really is in their life, and starting points really matter. Is this helpful to anybody? Some of you are going, I don't know, because I feel like I'm getting pushed into a corner here. I'm going to try to push you off the cliff this morning, okay? But I want you to remember this. It depends on where your starting point is. Now, let's get back to the question that we're really asking this morning. How is it that you and I can become stronger in love? 1 John chapter 4:19 says this. We love. Here's why we love. Because he, can you say the rest of it with me? He first loved us. We love because he first loves us. The only reason we know what love looks like is because God loved us in the beginning. We love because he first loved us. Now, if I could say, here is our defining theme for the morning, this is what it would be. The greater your awareness, the greater my awareness is of the Father's love, the stronger in love we will eventually become. The greater you are aware of the fact that God cares for you, that his love never runs out, that it never fails in your life, the greater you are aware of that and you sense that flowing into your own life, the more capacity you have to be able to be loving and your behavior to be loving towards other people. That's just how it goes. If it doesn't have that in your life, it won't happen. There's a tight correlation between the opening up of our hearts and minds to the infinite flow of the fountain of God's love and our ability to love other people. I can bear witness to this in my own life. Whenever my vision for the Father's love is expanded, my capacity to love also expands with that. I get stronger in love. I even feel it viscerally within my life. Now, what I would like to do this morning is I'd like to walk you through a New Testament text that had the single greatest impact on me personally regarding the extent and the depth of God's love in my life. The text is found in Luke chapter 15. You may want to turn to it. We're not going to look at it verse by verse this morning. I would love for you to go home this afternoon, take 15 minutes and read through it, and just do that throughout the rest of this week. And I think it will begin hitting you hard as we do that. But in Luke 15, let me kind of set the stage of what's going on. Jesus, in his ministry on earth, as he just began to walk around among people, he began to get into conversations with people that the very religious group of people called the Pharisees. I mean, the Pharisees are people that we would love today because they had a strong desire to do what God wanted them to do, but they just added a lot of rules with that, all right? And as he walked around, he began to get into conversations with people who were very, 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 very far away from God. These were people that the Pharisees felt like had no value at all. They were worthless pond scum, okay? That was how they thought of them. And they did not like it because Jesus was having long, protracted conversations with them. They especially did not like the fact that Jesus at times would sit down and have meals with them and seem to laugh and have fun with them. And they just could not figure that out. How in the world they can do that? And in their conversations with each other, they'd say, how in the world could this guy who claims to be the Messiah, who claims to be God's son, how could he hang around with those people? He ought to know who they are. He ought to avoid them at all costs. They're pathetic, worthless, jobless scum. And Jesus, being fully God, knew what they were thinking. He knew what they were saying. And so he leaves the crowd of irreligious people, and he walks over to the Pharisees, and he says, do you have time for 3 quick stories? Well, what could they say? Yeah, sure, go ahead. And so rapid fire. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure I know of another place in the Bible where he tells to the same group of people 3 stories just alike, back to back to back, back to back to back. You know all these stories. You have heard every one of them. They're familiar with you, but you, like me, may have not grasped some of the depth of these stories, and I really want you to grasp them this morning. 3 stories, okay? The first one is about a shepherd. Shepherd has 100 sheep. One of those sheep, one of those lambs wandered off. He went someplace else. You know how your sheep in your family are. You get to talk to them, they don't want to do what you want to do. They roll their eyes at you. It's very bad, you know, about things. And you want them to wear wool, they want to wear polyester. You know, they're just different things that they get upset with. And so this one lamb goes running off in another direction. Shepherd does a sheep count, one's missing, so he goes off and he begins to look with him. He is frantic. Where is this lamb? He looks all night. And when he finally finds the lamb, he puts the lamb on his shoulders, he brings him home to the rest of the flock, and later on the shepherd contacts all of his friends and his neighbors and says, hey, come to a party. I lost this lamb and I found him. It's back home. You know, we're going to have chicken, not lamb. Okay. And we're going to have a great time partying tonight. Come celebrate with us, okay? That's story number 1. Story number 2 is about a woman who had 10 coins, only 10 coins, probably her dowry, and she loses one of those coins, and she cannot find it anywhere. And she is just frantic. She searches the house, checks behind every cushion and all the sofas and chairs, cannot find it. She takes everything out of the house. She dismantles the furniture, sweeps the house until she finally finds the coin. She is so excited. She calls the rest of her neighbors and says, we're going to have a party tonight. I lost 1/10 of my life savings, and I found it, and we're going to party tonight. And so everybody came over and they had a party. Story number 3. It's the best known of all the stories. It's about a man who had 2 sons. One of them we normally consider as lost. Actually, both of them were lost. But the younger one was the one who was most rebellious about it. He wanted his full inheritance from his dad. And that would be like, in that day and time, it would just be scandalous for a Middle Eastern son to say, I want you dead, Dad. Give me the money now. You know, I'm tired of waiting for you to die. Give it to me. And so, major upset. It disrupts the whole family's economy. But the dad gives him his inheritance. The kid takes out on his own, buys worthless stuff, invests it in worthless friends, and he loses everything he's got. I mean, he is just doesn't have anything left at all. And he's working in a pig farm which for a Jewish person is about the lowest of the low, and he barely deserves that. And all of a sudden, the Bible says a great phrase. It says, he came to his senses. The light comes on, and he says, man, what a knucklehead I am. He said, I'm going to go back to my dad, and I'm going to ask for his forgiveness for this whole inheritance stupidity that I had, and maybe, just maybe, he'll let me live in the servant's house. I barely deserve that. I've screwed up royally, and I know it, and I just beg for forgiveness from Dad. And so he starts the long way back home, and he sees an older guy in the distance running towards him. And the guy, now you got to realize in those days they didn't wear suits, they had robes, and so he has his robe hiked up and put in his belt, and he's running as hard as he can. I don't know whether you've ever tried to run with a robe on. Anybody ever tried that? One morning I went out for the paper years ago, and a dog in the neighborhood stole my paper, and I had a robe on. I don't want to create the image of your mind, but it's not a pretty picture, all right? And running after this is his son. He's running towards him, and he thinks, oh man, Dad's all upset. And he can tell his dad's crying as he gets closer. But he realizes he's not mad. That's not the reason he's crying, because his dad comes up, picks him up, gives him a great big old hug, starts kissing his son, saying, welcome home, I've missed you. And they walk home to the homestead, and the father throws the party of all parties for this wayward son. Outfits his son with new clothes, And all during the party, the dad's going to everybody, his friends, and said, my son's home. My boy's back. My boy's back. And so these three stories, Jesus tells the Pharisees. And what's interesting to me is he doesn't really elaborate in telling them why he told the stories. Instead, basically he says, you know, think about this at a later time. See if you can figure out why I told the stories. Now, I have read those stories, and I had preached on those stories for a number of years. And I can remember, actually before I ever moved to Muskogee, sitting down and reading this during a quiet time, and for some reason, I asked myself for the first time, why did Jesus tell those stories back to back? Were there any common threads in those stories? And I realized that in each three of those stories, something that was worthwhile ended up missing. A sheep, a coin, son, and they're missing, common theme. And it was like the Holy Spirit was saying, okay, dummy, there's more to it than that. Keep going. God has a way of speaking to me that he doesn't speak to other people, I realize. But there was not only something that was missing, but something that was really worthwhile, something that mattered was missing. The sheep mattered to the shepherd. The coin mattered to the woman. The son mattered to the dad. And it was like a bomb went off in my head. Jesus told these three stories back to back to back to these Pharisees because they were bothered by the fact that he was hanging out with people who were far from God. And what Jesus was doing by a very ingenious way, he was telling these stories to tell the Pharisees, guess what, guys? Those irreligious people over there, those people you can't stand, those irreverent atheists that you'd like to get rid of, like to get out of the world, those people really matter to my Father. I know they don't matter to you. I know they annoy you. But my Father feels about them the same way the shepherd felt about the lost sheep and the woman about the coin, and the exact same way the Father felt towards his wayward son. And those unbelieving men and women, those men and women staying over there and right over there, they matter immensely to the Father. And when that hit me, I journal, but you can go find that journal, and I wrote down, people far from God really, really matter to God. Lost people matter to the Father. Found people matter to the Father. All people really matter to the Father. Rich people, poor people, young people, old people, black people, white people, brown people, purple people, eater peoples. Every single person, friends, listen to me, every single person that I lock eyes with, every single person is someone who is immensely important to the Father, and therefore is immensely important to me. So they probably ought to matter more to me than they're mattering. All people, if they matter to the Father, and I'm in a relationship with the Father and trying to be conformed to his image, then all people need to matter more to me. And I can't possibly describe to you the power of those moments when I was unpacking that text. Now, quick time out, okay? Don't really want to start trouble? Yeah, I do. Who can't you stand? Who can't you stand? Man, I wished we could shine a spotlight right down on your head today. If some of you would be blinding, you know. Blind us too. But shine it down your head, and then we could take your thoughts out of your head and shine it on the screens up here. And we could see what you're thinking. Who can't you stand? You know, who is it that you would love to be able to vote off the island because they annoy you to no end? Who is that? Longhorn fans? I'm with you on that one. Sorry, I'm a recovering Longhorn hater. I'm sorry. My journey's going to be a long one. I started in a deficit to be able to get to that point, okay? But some of you see a Democrat on TV, and you just go, can't stand Democrats. Some of you see Republicans talking, and you just say, you bigot, can't stand you. Some of you get to Tulsa and you can't stand slow drivers. Right? Some of you can't stand politicians. Some of you can't stand lawyers. Did you know a couple of weeks ago when it was so cold that lawyers had to put hands in their own pockets for the first time? I'm recovering, okay? I'm recovering. How about welfare queens? Welfare queens, they take advantage of the system, spending your money. How about rich people? Don't you hate rich people? So who can't you stand? Who can't you stand? You hear somebody speak with a certain accent and you're like, I hate people with that kind of accent. Others of you see a person with a certain ethnicity that you were taught to hate. Doesn't matter what shade of skin that you have personally. If they are of that shade that's different than you, they are the bad people. And they have to prove to you that they are any different than what I was taught. Who can't you stand? Maybe a certain kind of people from a certain religion. You find out they're this or they're that, and you make fun of them. And you can do anything you want. Who can't you stand? Yeah, guys, when I first came to the grips with the meaning of these stories from Luke 15 and the immensity of the Father's love for all people, I knew that day I had to begin the journey because I was below the line. I was below the line. And I had a journey to be able to go upward to get stronger in love. And when you discover who you can't stand and you sense the enormity of the Father's love towards you and how it just reigns over you, you've got to be able to allow that love to share out. Now, when you look at the world through, can I say this, Luke 15 lens? When you look at the world through Luke 15 lens, the world becomes different. People look different. It will strengthen your capacity to love. Now, I want you to hold that thought for a moment, put it in a little parking lot, and I'll return to it. There's something else that I saw that was in common on these three stories, and that's this. That which was missing mattered so much to whoever it was missing to, mattered so much that it was worth an all-out search to find it. The shepherd searches all night for the sheep. The woman tears the house apart to find the one little coin. The man looks into the distance constantly. He's hearing reports about his son. He's on a constant search of where his son is. And I realized that Jesus was communicating to the Pharisees that not only do irreligious people standing over there matter to the Father, they matter enough to the Father that he sent his only begotten Son into the world. He wanted to track them down, every one of them down, to tell them, no matter what you've done, no matter how deep of a hole you've dug yourself in, no matter who you've slept with or what you've snorted, God still cares for you. And there's a love in heaven with your name tag on it. There's a Father in heaven who's searching for you every single day and every hour. And he's hoping that you will come home someday. That's how the Father feels. And I'll tell you, when that thought hit me, I thought my head was going to explode. My thought was that not only do all people matter to God, but they matter so much that God is in a search mode, day and night, search mode, just trying to touch people's lives and trying to say, you matter to me. I have hope for you. You have a future with me. And all of us, all of you consider yourself Christ followers. You are so because you were sought after by the Father. And all of you who right now who are exploring Christianity and you have this kind of curiosity about it, can I tell you from God's word, it simply says that God is seeking you out. It's seeking you out. No matter how long, no matter how thoroughly you have pushed him away, he is still seeking after you because you matter to him so much. Now, all of this realization made me ask the fundamental question. Do I love people enough? Do I love all people enough to seek them out and to do everything within my power to introduce them to the Father's love? Or do I just stand idly by and say, that's not my problem. It's their attitudes, it's their problem. It's not my problem. If I'm doing that, then the Father's love's not reigning through me. Gang, if I were stronger in love, if you were stronger in love, we both would be turning heaven and earth over in order to introduce people to the Father's love. And we would be indiscriminate about it. It didn't matter what they looked like, what their background was, how deep in sin they were. We would want God's best for everybody, even for people who don't look like us, talk like us, or vote like us. Is your love that strong? Now, when I unpacked these stories, I noticed that there was one final common theme in all three of these stories. And it hit me so hard, I remember writing this down. The preacher and me had to make them alliterative. Retrieval brings rejoicing. Retrieval brings rejoicing. Retrievals bring rejoicing in all three stories. When the shepherd finds the lost sheep, what did he do? He had a party, had his friends come. When the woman finds her coin, what does she do? She has a party, asks her friends to come. When the man has his son come home, what does he do? He parties, he rejoices, you know? As a matter of fact, he throws this huge party. Luke 15 verse 10 says this, in the same way I tell you, there is what? Rejoicing in the presence of whom? All the angels of God over a single sinner who repents. What does a great party in heaven look like? Ever thought about that? What does a great party in heaven look like? I don't really know for certain because I've not been heaven to observe that. I just know from these stories, and I don't know whether they necessarily have a clue to it at all, but I know in the last story, this really kind of a sidelight here, that the older son got ticked off when he heard the dancing. And I thought, wait a minute, dancing and Christians, I'm not sure that goes together very well. A little sarcasm, it's okay to laugh, okay? But it was loud enough that it got their attention, so it had to be a loud rejoicing. I had a person back in the spring who was visiting on one Sunday morning when we had 2 baptisms. And as our custom here, we began applauding, and we broke into this song that we had, and people were up, and they were singing pretty good during that time. And after the service, this man met me out by the coffee shop, and he said, he was very critical of our clapping and shouting following the baptism. He said, you know, that was not reverent and it was in very poor taste. He said, baptism is a holy sacrament. And I agreed with him. I said, baptism is a holy time. And I also agree with you about our celebration. It wasn't nearly loud enough nor exuberant enough. Because if this parable contains any clues to the nature of rejoicing, they were dancing also. And they were dancing loud enough that others could hear their dancing. Must have been clogging, you know. Now, I don't know whether you can get your mind around this or not. But let me ask this question. Can I see the hands of those of you who have personally accepted Jesus Christ as the leader and forgiver of your life? May I see your hands? Okay. Okay. On that time, when you accepted Christ, when you personally made a decision to follow him, do you know that God commissioned 100,000 angels to have a party for you? I don't know whether it was 100,000, may have been 200,000. But there were a bunch of them. And if I can envision a scene with a big banquet hall, there's a front table there and there's a banner over the top that said, "Welcome home, scumbag James. Sinner James, welcome home." And now you may say, why do you call yourself a scumbag? Because that fits my life without Christ. And it fits a lot of yours too. But can you picture a banner and a banquet for you? All because of the joy of the Father, because one of his wayward sons or wayward daughters came home. That's how much the Father loves you. Can you get your mind around that? This is how much you matter to him. And for those of you who are exploring Christianity, you need to realize that right now, as I'm talking, you're just a step away from having a party being thrown in your honor in heaven and your name being on the banner. I don't know whether you'll get scumbag with it. You may have some other moniker. And it will thrill God that much if you become one of his today. Now, as I wrap this up, I want to go back and unpark something that I parked in the parking lot earlier, okay? And that's in 1 John chapter 4:19, because it's really the key, which says, and I want to remind you, we love. Why do we love? Because, why? He first loved us. Because he first loved us. And friends, I want to repeat this premise over and over. I want you to grasp this. The greater your awareness, the greater my awareness of the Father's love for me, the Father's love for you, the stronger in love we can become. Luke 15, I think more than any other chapter in the Bible, in my opinion, shows the world the height, the depth, the breadth, and the length of God's love for each of us. And when you get it and you receive it, when you're filled up with the love of the Father, you begin to look at people through Luke 15 lenses, and they don't look the same. You see them in Luke 15 lenses, you see younger people, you see older people, and you go, I love you both. You see black people, you see white people, you see brown people, and you say, I love you. You see Muslims and Mormons, and you say, you matter to the Father. You see gay people, you see straight people, you say, you matter to the Father. You see Republicans and Democrats, citizens and immigrants, you matter. And you can love because these people matter to the Father who loves you. I want to ask you, when will you stop hating? When will you draw a line in the sand and say, I will not hate anymore? And if any people come in my field of vision, I know immediately that they matter immensely to the Father. Somehow, some way, they've got to also matter to me. And if you allow the Father's love to flow through your life on a regular basis, if you put on your Luke 15 lenses to look at people, you'll go to work and you'll find the person that everybody else has shoved away, that everybody else is making jokes about, and they are shunning, and you will go to that person and somehow communicate to them how much they matter to the Father. You will love them. You will love them in a way that even though you may not get anything back in return, you will still love them, because that's what love does. And if you allow the Father's love to flow through your life, man, this racial stuff that's tearing our country apart, you can love over racial lines. You can love over ethnic lines. You can love people with different accents. It's not a problem, it's child play, because the immensity of the Father's love enables you to be stronger in love. Are you willing to grow stronger in love in 2015? Are you willing to grow stronger in love in 2015? Stand with me, would you? Today we're going to seal the sermon with a song. Say that 3 times really fast. And while we're singing this song, one of the songs I think communicates it so well, we sang it earlier. While you're singing this song about love, I want to ask you to open up your heart a little wider. a little wider than you've ever had it open before. Because God's love is not going to give up on you. And because it will not give up on you, you will not give up on loving others who do stupid, dumb, scumbag sorts of things. And those of you who have done so much hating in your life, now would be a perfect time to say, I open my life. Father, I ask you to cleanse me. Cleanse me with your love. No more hating for me ever again. And for some, this would be a perfect time to say, I open my life up to the love of Christ. Forgive me, I want to come home. If you have a public decision to make, now's the time to do it. If you want to join a band of recovering sinners and scumbags, just look around you, okay? And you can tell others that are love-starved. If you want to be a part of our family, that's what we do. We tell others who are love-starved people that God's love never gives up, never runs out on them.